Chapter 13, The Book Contest. Says My Drawing. Can't see it very well. My two favorite classes at school were library class and art class. At the library, we were allowed to borrow 3 books at a time, and Miss McCurdy would read to us. I loved books. I read every Betsy book in the library. Then I read all the books by an author named Ruth Chu. Her books were all about magic and witches. They were so exciting. I loved art class, too. Mr. Valente taught us how to mix colors. My favorite color was red, but you can't mix red. You can make orange from red and yellow, or purple from red and blue, but you could never mix 2 colors together and get red. We also got to make pictures on scratchboard. Instead of drawing black lines on a sheet of white paper, you scratched away the black surface with a special pen. I did a drawing of some flowers against the moon. One day, Ms. McCurdy came to our art class. It was funny seeing her there because we usually only saw her in the library. "Hello, class," she said. "Mr. Valente and I are combining our classes for a very special project. We're going to have all of you write and illustrate your own books." Our own books? Could we do that? Could I do that? Ms. McCurdy told us there was a contest that we would be entering. It was called Written and Illustrated by the National Awards Contest for Students. For this contest, you entered books that you wrote and drew yourself. And if you won first place, they would publish your book, just like the books in the library. Ms. McCurdy would help us with the writing, and Mr. Valente would help us with the drawing, but we had to think up our own ideas. All day long, I thought about the project. Becky said she was going to do her book about a unicorn. Melody said she might write a story about a singer. I heard some boys talk about how they were going to do their stories about pirates or wizards with swords. I couldn't decide what to do mine about. At home, I told everyone about the project. "Do a book about a girl that can read minds," Lissy said. "Do something with panda bears," Kiki said. "How about a cookbook?" Mom said. "Better make it an eating book," Dad said. "You're good at that." "No," I said, "those aren't good ideas. I need a good idea so I can win the contest." Mom shook her head. "It's not easy to win a contest. You have to work very hard." "Yes," said Dad, "like how you practice the violin. Everything takes time and effort." "So I have to practice making a book every day?" I asked. "That doesn't make sense." "No," Mom said, "but you'll have to work on your book a little bit every day if you want it to be good, just like practicing an instrument. Did I ever tell you about Grandma and the paper piano?" The paper piano. When I was a little girl, maybe a little bit younger than you are, before Grandpa started his business, we were very poor. Our house was small and old with a cracked cement floor that was never clean, no matter how much Grandma swept and scrubbed it. The bathroom was broken down and rotten, green mold grew underneath the sink, and when it rained, worms would come out of the walls. Grandma didn't like being poor. Before she married Grandpa, she had been a fine lady. Now, we were the poor family of a medical student. But Grandma knew it was only temporary. Once Grandpa became established, we would live in a nice house, and I would grow up to be a fine lady just like she had been. So while we were waiting for Grandpa to get established, she wanted me to learn all the fine things ladies knew, and one of those things was how to play the piano. Grandma looked all over for a good piano teacher that we could afford, and finally she found one. He was a young man who lived over a mile away, and since we were too poor to buy a piano, he said that I could come to his house to practice every day after he was done giving lessons. Here's the piano teacher's house. Every day I walked the long way to his house. He lived in a grand house. I used to think that it was probably just like the house Elvis Presley would live in, because it was an American-style house. Outside the house was a garden with a rainbow of flowers. There were exotic flowers in the garden, red and yellow roses with their vivid petals spilling over each other, marigolds looking like bursts of orange sunshine, and brilliant violet pink petunias. The house itself had 2 floors. I never got to see what was upstairs, but the downstairs was so magnificent. The floor was smooth and glossy wood, polished like a piece of gold and amber. There were curly carved tea chests and furniture, shiny chestnut-colored striped curtains, and ivory glass vases with blue flowers painted on them. On the porcelain cover of a gold box, an English lady smiled at me. She wore a big pink dress, the skirts puffing like an upside-down peony, and she always seemed to be inviting me to open the box, but I never dared. The paintings of wealthy ancestors were watching. Their stern gazes forbade me to touch any of their riches. My piano teacher had a fascinating house. This is the gold box. But the walk to his house was long and dull. By the time I got there, my legs ached as if they had been beaten with bamboo stalks. I always tried to get out of going to his house. "It's too hot," I would say, or "It's raining." But no matter what I said, Grandma still would make me go practice. Every day she marched me out of the house until finally one day she grew tired of hearing me complain. "Okay," she said, "you don't have to go, but you still have to practice." I was confused. If I didn't have to go, how would I practice? How could I practice without a piano? But Grandma calmly took out a big sheet of paper. She cut it and measured it and colored it in, and it was only after she had filled in all the black rectangles that I recognized what she had made. It was a drawing of a piano keyboard. Grandma put the paper piano and my music on the table in front of me and said, "Here, you can practice on this." I played my scales, my exercises, and my solo, and every time I touched a paper key, Grandma would sing the note. This says Mom as a little girl, Grandma, and the paper piano. So, no matter what, I practiced the piano every day. Sometimes I practiced on a real piano, and sometimes I practiced on the paper piano. It was a long time before we got a piano of our own, but when we did, I was able to play so well that they invited me to play in the school orchestra. Later, I played a solo at a big concert, and when I was done, everyone stood up and clapped. Grandma was so happy that she cried, Mom finished. "So, if I win the book contest, will you cry?" I asked. "Yes," Mom said, "very hard." "We'll all cry," said Dad. "I'll buy a box of Kleenex just for the occasion."